I didn't leave when you fell, Calvin. I left when I realized you weren't getting back up fast enough. That is what one girlfriend said while walking into a hotel with another man, while her boyfriend was still trying to survive the collapse of his life. Have you ever gone through that kind of pain? The kind where people do not leave when life first breaks you. They stay just long enough to see whether you are still worth believing in. Good evening, and welcome back. Tonight's story is about failure, betrayal, and the moment a man realizes that the people closest to him were never really standing beside him at all. So sit back and listen carefully, because this one is colder, crueler, and more revealing than it first appears. Before we begin, this is an original fictional story written by me for entertainment. AI was used only for voice production. Now, enjoy.
The night I handed my best friend a hotel room key and watched him walk my girlfriend to the elevator, I was wearing a name tag, not a jersey, not a kit number, a plastic rectangle clipped to a polyester vest that smelled like the previous shift's fabric softener. My name in block letters, Calvin. Like I needed the reminder. I said exactly 3 things. Elevators to the left. Chickacons at 11. Have a good night. Then I turned back to the screen, pulled up the next reservation, and kept working. That's what 8 months of learning to swallow things quietly does to you. You get very good at it. But if I'm going to tell you what happened that night at the front desk of the Ashwood Suites, I have to start somewhere else. I have to start with a kitchen that smelled like pot roast and fresh laundry, and a question a woman asked me that I should have paid a lot more attention to. I grew up in a house where my father called football a gambler's sport. Not because he'd lost money on it. He just didn't trust anything that looked like ambition dressed up as a game. His version of a good life was a trade skill and a lawn you mowed yourself on Saturdays. We had one real argument. I left 2 days later with 2 duffel bags and a trial date at a youth academy, 40 minutes south. I was 18. I thought I was running towards something. Daniel and Elaine Mercer came into the picture 6 months after that. Daniel coached weekend clinics at the academy. He saw me running sprints alone after sessions ended, and one evening just walked over and said there was food at his house if I hadn't eaten. I hadn't eaten. They never made it a ceremony. There was a room above the garage nobody was using. There was always a plate kept warm. Daniel fixed the leak in my car's rear window without being asked. Elaine remembered exactly how I took my coffee and never asked intrusive questions. I lived there 3 years. It was the first place I'd ever felt like I could stay without performing anything. That should have told me something about what I'd been doing everywhere else. I met Ava Bennett at a dinner party at the Mercer House in late October. 8 people, wine on the counter, music low. She'd come with a friend of Elaine's. I'd been at training until 6 and came in through the side door, still carrying my bag, tape on my left ankle, vest hanger marks on my shoulders. She was near the bookshelf when I walked past. Looking at a framed photo, the group shot from my first academy year, all of us in kit, bad haircuts, arms around each other. You were younger there, she said without turning. Younger than what? I asked. Than you look now. Later in the kitchen, she asked how long I'd been staying with the Mercers. I told her a few years, that they'd been good to me. She nodded, looked around the house in that slow, cataloging way she had, and said, "Must be nice, knowing that if one thing falls through, you're still not really alone." Then she asked, almost as an afterthought, "Has he always just given you a key? Like an actual one?" I said yes. She nodded once. "That's rare," she said, not like it meant something to her, like she was filing it. I let it go. It was a good evening. She stayed until people started leaving and said she hoped she'd see me again. I told her I hoped so too. I meant it. I shouldn't have. The first few months were good enough that I stopped noticing the things I should have. She came to matches. She was warm with Elaine in exactly the right calibrated way. She remembered my training schedule and texted before games and asked which foot I'd scored with, all the right things. But there were moments. After a match where I'd been subbed at 62 minutes with no tactical logic I could identify, I was working through it in the car, still too wound up to let it sit. She listened for about 90 seconds before she said, "Even if football takes longer than you want, you're not really in the same position as guys who have nobody behind them." I went quiet. She meant it kindly. I know she meant it kindly. But what the sentence said was, "You have a cushion, so relax." What I heard underneath it was, the actual problem you're describing doesn't matter as much as the safety net beneath you. She wasn't talking about the 62 minutes. She was talking about the house. I let that go too. When you're in something that mostly feels good, you get skilled at constructing reasons why the parts that don't aren't actually that bad. Theo Reed had been in my orbit since the academy days. Same youth system, same interclub scrimmages, same side of a few shared friendships. Central midfielder, compact, intelligent, the kind of player who never made the highlight reel but never made the mistake that cost 3 points. He'd been at the Mercers enough times to know where the spare chairs were kept and how to work the temperamental latch on the side gate. There was an afternoon at a Sunday cookout in the back garden when I went into the garage for ice and came back to find Theo and Ava at the kitchen counter. Nothing was happening, they were just talking, but she was laughing in the specific way she laughed when she was actually enjoying herself. The real version, the one that takes a second to recover from. I set the ice down. She turned and said, "Theo says you were always the one people thought would make it." There it was, past tense, thought, not is making it, not going to, thought. A completed assessment offered by Theo about me to my girlfriend while I was getting ice. He shrugged when I looked at him. Just talking about the old days. I said something like, yeah, the old days, and we moved on, but I filed it away. In the cabinet, I was trying very hard not to open. The season turned bad slowly, then fast. New coaching staff in January, different priorities, different mental map of who was essential. My name started showing up less in the starting lineup, then less in training rotations, then my locker got reassigned to the far end of the row, the part where they put players being managed out without saying it directly. I'd seen it happen to others. I knew what it meant. Around the same time, Ava started asking different questions. Not how was training, more like when's your contract up and have you thought about what else you'd do, and my friend's company is looking for account managers. Nothing glamorous but stable, always said with care, always with that particular gentleness that makes it hard to push back without seeming unreasonable. Theo stayed close, food after sessions, texts about the ankle, this is just how it goes sometimes. You've got more in you than they're using right now. The exact right words at the exact right moments. I still wasn't seeing it. The club called me in on a Thursday morning in March. Small office, performance director, words like restructuring and going in a different direction. He thanked me for my contribution, said I was welcome to use the facilities until end of month. I packed my locker in 20 minutes, moved fast so I wouldn't have to talk to anyone. My car was the last one in the lot. I sat in it for an hour without starting the engine. Not crying, just watching a pigeon work at something near the drainage grate by the far goalpost, methodical and completely indifferent to everything around it. Then I called Theo. He picked up on the second ring. "Got cut," I said. He went quiet, then told me to drive to his place. We sat in his kitchen for 3 hours. "Don't tell anyone yet," he said. "Give yourself a few weeks, find a trial. Don't let this become the story before you've written the next chapter." He knew someone at a hotel near the city center needing night shift cover. It would keep money coming in while I figured things out. Partway through, he asked, "Does Ava know?" "No," I said. He nodded slowly. "Maybe keep it that way till you have something lined up. No point in that conversation if you've got an answer ready." It sounded reasonable. It was the most reasonable thing anyone had said to me all day. He said all the right things. Looking back, Theo always said the right things. He just had reasons I couldn't see yet for saying them. The lie started practical and turned into a life. Every morning I left the Mercer house with my training bag. What was inside had changed. No club kit, no boots for a session that didn't exist, but the bag was still by the door at the same time, still went into the car the same way. I worked nights at the Ashwood Suites, trained alone in the mornings at a public pitch 3 miles away. I had 2 semi-pro clubs interested in trials. The plan was, find a contract first, then tell people. That's not hiding, I told myself. That's sequencing. Ava texted like nothing had changed. Training late? Coach still being tough on you? You sound tired? Get some sleep. I texted back Short's answers. She had no reason to question them. Or so I thought. 6 weeks in, I came home late and found Ava in the Mercer kitchen with Elaine. Something between them had the texture of a full conversation before I walked through the door. I caught the last edge of it as I pushed through. Ava's voice, mid-sentence. "I just mean practically." Then silence. It stopped when I came in. Not suspiciously, just the particular way conversations stop when the person being discussed arrives. Elaine asked, "How are things at the club, really?" I said, "Messy. Nothing final." She nodded. Ava turned and picked up a dish towel and started wiping down a counter that was already clean. Someone had told Ava. There was only one person who could have. I went to my room, lay on the bed with my shoes still on, and stared at the water stain on the ceiling Elaine had always meant to paint over. I'd been holding this together for 6 weeks, and it had already leaked. The question circling was, what exactly was Ava doing with what she knew? The answer came 3 weeks later on a Tuesday night. I'd been at the public pitch until dark, working set pieces against a wall, the thing you do when you can't afford proper equipment and your pride won't let you stop moving. I tried Ava 3 times, no answer. I watched her go online on the chat app, then offline, then online again. The thing that happens when someone picks up their phone, reads it, and puts it back down. 5 minutes later, Theo texted. She's fine. She called me. Big fight with her mom or something. Told her to sleep it off. I read that 4 times standing on the pitch in the dark. Not because she'd called Theo instead of calling me back. People call whoever's available. What was strange was the texture of the message. She called me. He texted me about it the way someone texts when they're managing 2 channels of the same stream. He was in the middle. He was comfortable there. Next morning, Ava texted, "Sorry about last night. Didn't want to drag you into my family stuff when you already have enough going on. You already have enough going on." She knew. And she was using my real situation as cover, folding it into a reason to keep her distance, packaging it as consideration. I didn't respond for 4 hours. Then I wrote, "It's fine," and put my phone face down. The dinner at the Mercers that ended everything was not supposed to be significant. 2 of Daniel's old colleagues. Decent wine. Elaine's lamb, which she only made for people she actually liked. Easy conversation cycling through sports and local news without landing anywhere sharp. One of Daniel's friends mentioned my former club, the new coaching setup, the roster cuts that had started becoming public, the kind of thing you say at a dinner table when you have no idea it's sitting next to a grenade. Daniel looked at me, natural reflex, the way you turn toward the person who would know. Theo said, "I thought they knew." Not a question, a statement, delivered in the careful voice of someone who'd made a choice. Ava looked at her plate and said quietly, "I assumed he told you. The table didn't recover from that." After Daniel's friends left, the 4 of us stood in the mudroom. Daniel's jacket still on. Elaine with her arms crossed, not angry, just braced. Daniel asked, "How long?" I said nothing. He looked at the training bag by the door. The one that had been there every morning for weeks, sitting exactly where it always sat. He looked at it the way you look at something you should have noticed sooner. "Losing the club is not what hurts," he said, letting us stand in the middle of a lie inside our own house. "That's what hurts." I said, "I was fixing it." He said, "Not here. I won't have this house turned into part of somebody else's calculation." Elaine set the dish towel she'd been holding down on the side table, folded it once, and walked out of the room. That single, quiet folding was worse than anything either of them said out loud. They asked me to find somewhere else to stay for a while. I packed in 40 minutes, same speed as the locker. The room I rented was 14 feet wide and smelled like someone else's cleaning products. Hotel uniform on one hook, training clothes on another. Boots under the bed because there was nowhere else. Ava kept texting, "You need time to process. Your situation is a lot right now. I don't want to make this harder than it already is." Texts that looked like care from the outside. Texts doing the work of an exit without ever using the word. I was watching her leave in slow motion, one careful message at a time, and she never moved fast enough to force a real conversation. Just withdrawing in increments small enough that I couldn't point to any single one and say, "There, that's when it stopped." Theo still showed up. Trial links. A contact at a non-league club up north. His car occasionally parked near the hotel when I was finishing a night shift. I told myself he was just being supportive. I was wrong about that. I'd been wrong about it for a while. The night it broke open was a Friday. The Ashwood Suites fills up from 7 onward on weekends. Couples, business travelers, people carrying that particular looseness that comes from being somewhere that isn't home. I was at the desk at 9:40 when I saw Theo's car roll into the drop lane. I knew the car, black, clean, carefully maintained. I didn't move. My hands stayed on the keyboard. Then Ava stepped out of the passenger side. She was carrying a bag, not a handbag, an overnight bag. The soft-sided black one I recognized because I'd helped her carry it up 3 flights of stairs the previous spring, back when we were still the kind of people who did things like that for each other. Theo came around the front of the car. They walked toward the entrance together. The desk is angled from the main entrance, and I was half behind the support pillar. They didn't see me immediately. I heard them before they reached the counter. Theo, "You sure he still hasn't told you himself?" Ava, "He doesn't need to. He still leaves voice notes like he has training." That sentence. She knew every detail. The voice, the bag by the door, the whole routine. She'd known for weeks, maybe longer, and she'd let me keep going. Let me keep performing. Not because she was being kind, because as long as she didn't say it out loud, she wasn't responsible for any of it. She'd left me holding the weight of my own lie because picking it up would have meant owning a decision. I stepped around the pillar. Theo saw me first. Something moved through his face, not guilt, something more controlled. A quick recalibration. Ava's hand closed tighter around the strap of the bag. I looked at the key fob still in Theo's hand and held out my palm. He placed it in my hand, because what do you do when the valet asks? I gave him the parking ticket. I set the room keycard on the desk between us. Room 314, elevators to the left, checkout at 11. Then I went back to the screen. Behind me I heard them cross to the elevator bank. The doors opened, the doors closed. I processed the next 3 check-ins, an anniversary couple who'd brought their own champagne, a business traveler who needed a 5:15 wake-up call, a woman who apologized twice for asking for extra towels. I got her the towels. 20 minutes later, I was at the service entrance on my break when footsteps came up behind me. Ava had come back down. She stood a few feet away, arms crossed, and started talking before I could say anything. It was complicated. There was no good time. I kept shutting down every time she tried to bring anything real up. She couldn't keep waiting indefinitely for me to let her in when I never let anyone in. She didn't know what to do with what Theo had told her. She'd tried to stay. She'd still been there. That had to count for something. I waited until she finished. Then I said, "How long have you known?" She opened her mouth, closed it. That pause. 1 second. It answered everything I'd been carrying for 3 months. "Long enough that you could have said something," I said. "Long enough that staying was a choice." She said, "You weren't letting me." "How long, Ava?" She looked at the ground. I turned and went back inside. Theo was in the lobby, not pretending to head upstairs anymore, just standing there, waiting. He'd heard enough to know how it went. He said, "Someone had to know what was really happening to you." 5 words that sounded like concern. 5 words that were actually a claim, as though knowing my situation gave him the right to use it, however it took him. As though standing outside, someone's falling and calling it staying informed. I looked at him for a long moment. Then I went back to work. I was still on shift. I needed the hours. And I had nothing left to say to someone who'd spent months watching me drown and called it friendship. I blocked them both the next morning. No message, no explanation, just the sound of a door closing, something I'd learned to do from a man who once told me that if people don't want to keep you, you don't ask to stay. I applied for a transfer to the hotel chain's East Side location. Worse commute, different crew, nobody who knew me. I got it. The semi-pro trial up north was that Tuesday. I drove up in a car that needed new brake pads and had a radio that cut out past 60. 2 sessions. After the second, the coach pulled me aside and said they'd be in touch by Friday. They called Thursday. I had somewhere to be again. The Mercers found out everything in pieces, the way people always find out things that have been kept from them. Ava disappeared from their orbit inside 2 weeks, no more Saturday evenings. No more showing up with the easy familiarity she'd spent months building, just gone. Then 2 weeks after that, she appeared in a photo with Theo on his Instagram. Nothing explicit, just the 2 of them at a restaurant, his shoulder, her profile. The kind of photo that is technically nothing and actually a complete sentence. Elaine called me the day she saw it. I didn't answer. She called again 2 days later. Still didn't answer. I wasn't angry at the Mercers. I understood exactly why Daniel had said not here. The lie had been real. The breach had been real. What I needed was something to bring back to that house besides the wreckage. I needed to earn my way back rather than fall back in. It took 3 more weeks. I was unloading crates at a catering depot I'd picked up 2 mornings a week when I heard gravel shift on the other side of the chain link fence. Daniel was standing there, hands in his jacket pocket, not looking directly at me, looking just past my shoulder, the way men look when they're doing something hard and the only way through it is to show up without a plan. We stood there. I thought he might say something. He didn't. He stood a few seconds longer, then turned and walked back to his truck and drove away without looking back. I went back to the crates. The envelope was under my door 7 days later. Thin, no stamp, hand-delivered. Inside, a key. Not new. The original key from the room above the garage, with the small scratch on the bow from the time I dropped it and Daniel ran it over with the lawnmower. I knew it immediately. He'd kept it. Or she had. Underneath it, a piece of notepaper, Elaine's handwriting, the compressed cursive she used when she was being concise. "If you want to talk, don't call first. Just come hungry." I sat on the floor of my room with that for a long time, not because it fixed anything, because it didn't promise to fix anything. It just said, the table is still there. The plate will still be warm. The rest we figure out when you walk through the door. That was the Mercer way. Not speeches. Small, accurate things that meant exactly what they were and nothing more. I went on a Sunday morning 3 weeks later. No call ahead. I drove over and knocked at the side door, the kitchen door, the one I always used, and Elaine opened it. She looked at me a second, then stepped back. The kitchen smelled the same. Coffee, something from the oven earlier, and that particular smell the house had always had. I've never been able to name it exactly, but I would know it anywhere for the rest of my life. Daniel was at the table with the newspaper. He looked up. Said nothing at first, then nodded. The single nod that means several things at once, all of them understood between us. Elaine set a mug down in front of the chair I always sat in. We didn't go straight at it. We talked about the new club, the schedule, whether my car would survive winter. Normal conversation, the kind that isn't actually normal at all when you're feeling your way back into a room after breaking something in it. At some point, Elaine said, "We should have asked you earlier, instead of waiting for you to offer it up." I said, "I should have told you, instead of letting you live inside something I built." Daniel said, "Yeah." Elaine was quiet for a moment. Then she said, by the time we started asking, she'd stopped asking how you were. She was asking what would still be there if you fell. I didn't say anything to that. I didn't need to. And somewhere between that sentence and the food going on the table, something else clicked into place. Something I'd been circling for months without being able to land on. Theo hadn't told Ava because she needed to know. He'd told her because he wanted to see what she would do with it. When she started pulling back, the different questions, the careful distance, the slow recalibration, he had his answer. She was the kind who moved when the ground shifted, and once he knew that, he stepped in. He hadn't waited for me to fall. He'd just been patient enough to let the information do the work. That was the whole accounting. No extended post-mortem, no reconstruction of who'd done what and in what order. Just two acknowledgments laid down next to each other and left there. Elaine had made more food than two people needed. She said nothing about that. We had lunch. I play for a club now 3 tiers below where I was. Smaller ground, smaller crowd. The pitch needs recutting every 10 days because the budget doesn't stretch to a full groundskeeper, and in wet months you feel every soft patch underfoot. The changing room is a converted porta-cabin. The showers take 40 seconds to go hot. I like it. Nobody's calculating my runway. The coach is direct in a way I can actually work with. The team is a mix. Guys who are climbing, guys who peaked elsewhere, guys who just love the game enough to drive 40 minutes on a Tuesday evening for a session that ends in the dark. I am not the promising one here. I'm not the cautionary tale either. I'm just a player who wants the ball and works hard and goes home when it's done. That turns out to be enough. There's a ritual I do before every session. Get there early. Sit on the bench in the empty changing room. Tape my ankle, left first, always, even though it hasn't given me problems in months. Then lace my boots, about 6 minutes total. Nobody knows I do it. Nobody asks. A ritual isn't superstition. It's how you tell yourself you belong here. You have always belonged here. None of what happened changes this. This morning it was cold, proper cold, the kind that settles in your joints before you warm up. I got to the ground before anyone else. Gate code, chain link swinging back, the pitch still holding the dew from overnight. Cones from last night's session still in the net at the south end. I walked over and started setting them out. Nobody asked me to. Nobody was watching. The light was that thin gray before the sky makes up its mind. The grass was wet. Traffic on the ring road a quarter-mile north, something that might have been a dog and nothing else. I set out the cones, walked back to my bag, laced my boots. Looked at the pitch. No one here knows what I looked like when things were falling apart. No one here ran the numbers on whether I was worth believing in. No one here stood at a safe distance from my falling and called it concern. They just know what I do when I have the ball. I stepped out onto the grass. The cold came through the soles immediately, that particular wetness that tells you the ground is honest. In 40 minutes, the rest of the squad would come through the gate and it would get loud and physical and completely ordinary. But right now it was just me and the pitch and the quiet.
All right, that's the end of today's story. And to me, this story was never just about cheating. It was about something colder than that. What happens when people stop asking who you are and start calculating what remains around you when life goes bad? My personal takeaway is simple. The right people do not measure your value by your momentum, your safety net, or how useful you still look when things fall apart. The ones who quietly recalculate your worth when the ground shifts were never truly standing with you in the first place. And maybe that is the hardest lesson here. Losing the wrong people can hurt, but it also reveals where you were never genuinely safe to begin with. Let me know what you think in the comments. Who do you think was worse here? Ava, Theo, or the silence that came before the truth? Take care, and I'll see you in the next story.